Hey guys, it's Kristina here. Welcome to Create a Place podcast. Today I'm here with Randy Shaw. He is founder and director of sales for BRYTESIGHT. It is a technology architecture firm, and you're going to really enjoy this conversation about technology and how that affects the culture of the space and the success of the people in it. So stay tuned. Hey Randy, so welcome to Create a Place podcast. I am glad you're here. I know you're kind of on a whirlwind tour of meetings and stopped by the studio today, so I really appreciate your time. Before we dive into kind of what you do, I'd really like to give the audience a little bit of background on who you are, kind of because you came from an unconventional, I guess, so to speak, background into technology and workplace. So talk to us about this professional soccer and how that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Always a fan of you and your firm, and
thank you.
Love our expansion to Tampa, and I was just overjoyed you wanted to add me to this cast. I've listened to every episode; it's been spectacular.
Yay,
I know
fan.
I know some of your guests personally, and so it's also been a treat to hear them share their experience. By the way, I have told multiple people on this trip to Tampa I was going to be on your podcast, and you have a lot more fans than you might realize.
Oh, awesome. That's good to hear. I know it's sometimes disheartening because you don't get the likes and the things that you want to see, but then, you hear out and about. And I thought, oh, okay, well, let me know you're listening. Like, let me know that you're there so I can acknowledge you, So I appreciate that. Thanks for spreading the word.
Yeah, you've got an underground fan base, maybe not that you weren't aware of. So I'm glad that I could share that with you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, so a little bit unconventional background. I actually looked that up in preparation for today. Was a town of 3,500, and when I left 32 years ago, they've added 32 people.
Wow!
So they've added one human a year.
Okay.
So a pretty small, static state childhood. My eyes were opened. Luckily, I had an aptitude and talent for soccer. That really did open the world for me. Got exposed into a much bigger world. For instance, I still thought in college everyone had a white Christmas.
Oh, okay.
Well, because when you watch the shows and then you have a roommate from Santa Monica who has to educate you,
you say, wait,
not everyone gets
you
snow.
have sun on Christmas? What is that all about?
Yeah.
You're wearing shorts?
Yeah, so, I'm old, pre-internet, so you only know what you see.
Absolutely.
And what you hear. So, yeah, soccer took me to a lot of different destinations and opened some horizons for me, college and otherwise. I think the exposure to those areas and learning diversity and passion and other people, how their language works, what motivates them, what inspires them, was something I always gravitated toward. And so I was a psychology major. I was going to be a doctor, a surgeon, pivoted once I learned some of the rigors. I actually went through the whole process, did the MCAT, got into med school, but surgeons actually dissuaded me from it. There's a whole other story there. So I'm not disheartened I went through the rigors. I think anything that challenges you makes you better. But soccer was right there for me to go on. Lived in Europe, so got even more diversity in cultures and experiences. And a few steps after that led me into corporate America. And I kind of fell into, design, construction, real estate space, but focusing purely on the technology systems in those buildings and spaces.
I'm sure you learned a lot about, not just the diversity in the culture and being, overseas. I feel like that's a big tell, and what's happening, in the world of workplace and all. We always seem to be a little bit behind the times here in the U.S. So I'm sure that was a great experience. I'm sure being part of a team, traveling with the team, doing all of that, that's got to help. And I know you're such a great team player and you're, such an advocate, for the sandbox mentality and getting folks together. And I think I would assume that's really part of what led you, to be a founder for BRYTESIGHT. So tell us a little bit about BRYTESIGHT and how that works. And, because I think a lot of people are not going to understand what you do. And I think it's important to understand that because it's such a critical piece, in planning for the future, the technology for a company. So just give us a little background on what BRYTESIGHT does, how you, how that came to be, what passions led you to do that. And then you've also got, some new, kind of some directions that you're taking, and we love to hear about that too.
Yeah, of course. Back in the very beginning, technology was where you put the mop closet and storage boxes. And obviously today it is as pervasive into a workspace or an entertainment space or a retail space as anything.
Absolutely. It can make or break the space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, designers and construction and professionals like you, I always say, do the sticks and bricks. We do the bits and bytes. So we're
Love
there
it.
for every sensory, audio, visual, security, camera, control that makes a space alive from a digital perspective. That's our role. And of course, the last 25 years, the advancement in technology we've all seen in our personal lives, from the computer we hold in our hand called a phone down to every stimuli we feel on a building,
Sure.
LED walls, you name it. We do that work. And so I had the privilege of helping some other technology consulting firms grow, and had just enough PM architect clients give me a lot of validation that they liked my approach, the whole family, the team, the people centric. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that the BRYTESIGHT team's mantra is, although we're in the technology space, we're in the people business.
Yes, that's important.
Yeah, and I think sometimes an engineering discipline can distance themselves from focusing on the people aspect of the space.
Right.
And I think BRYTESIGHT is really committed to that. And our mission statement was really authored by myself and the first 10 employees. And I'm really proud of all the active words that were put into that statement. And most of it is about drive, strive, champion, own, passion. These are the things, the building blocks of BRYTESIGHT.
Very actionable. And tell us, give me a little example of what the difference is, though, between BRYTESIGHT and what you do versus an internal IT, department, or architecture and, any of MEP services, or just simply, data services that are out there, running cable. You do something a little bit differently because you actually will architect it. You will create the plan, not necessarily, providing it all. You create what the path is, and as you had said to me recently, without architectural plans, you can't go to construction. In the same way, if you don't have a plan in place that's really, solid, it's going to be hard to go to that next step and to get those vendors in to do all the things you need to do if you don't have, that overarching point of view, right? So just, a little tidbit on what that difference is, beyond, what I'm saying here. What makes you stand out, from a lot of those other companies, and what makes you an asset, to an executive team, to an end user?
That is a great synopsis of the current landscape, and it's just evolving. Probably not as fast as it should. I actually did some research on this about a decade ago on why this was a blind spot. And where I sourced it was, if you look at the typical MBA curriculum at a graduate level university, that a lot of the execs are on an MBA track who rise into business. Very few even have a technology component to the curriculum. So it's not uncommon for an executive to come out, a business leader, and have little visibility or understanding of the technology aspects of the org, right? And now that we've seen it's gotten more complex, more critical, more costly, that blind spot can be exacerbated in the C-suite. And so without them understanding the criticality in the landscape, it's often deferred and brought on a little late, maybe an afterthought, maybe a little disjointed.
Sure.
I always think of, to pull off the design and construction of these gorgeous spaces is like a symphony. It's all these moving parts in harmony, making this beautiful, masterpiece. And I always envision an image I always share with customers. You're watching a symphony of all these parts moving in perfect harmony. And all of a sudden, IT comes in mid-song and starts saying, excuse me, pardon me, and they're banging people. They stop playing their music, they misplay a note, they knock over a music stand, you hear sheets of paper falling to the ground, and the whole piece just falls flat, and they go, sorry, excuse me, and they take their seat.
What a great analogy. And it's not necessarily their fault that they're coming in that late. I think that is the key that you're probably getting to here, is that's not their fault all the time. They're not invited to come to the stage until very late in the game. And that's a huge issue. So
That's exactly right. Nobody has ill intentions here. It's just an awareness issue. So I find myself being an educator most of my days. And I was with the CFO and the CTO of a very large company Monday. And they were discussing their current landscape of IT for their organization. And most of it came down to organizational alignment and IT being brought too late and not being involved in things you didn't even think to involve them in.
right.
When you think about some of your guests and people and processes, you think about chief operations officers, chief HR officers, chief people officers. Your people are going to be using technology what % of their day?
It's huge, right? Do you have the statistic? But
No.
it's massive,
Right.
you know?
And so
if not the entire day, you're going to be on
Exactly.
some kind of technology, whether it's your personal technology or team or, just your computer to get your work done. So that's a big chunk of what you're doing every day. If it's not done well, then how can you get your job done, right?
Exactly. So I actually encourage the C-suite to, when you think about your everyday operation of people, where's the technology component being addressed in those policies and procedures and even your strategy? And so we're really just trying to help them make sure that if you think about it ahead of time or in time, you get better outcomes.
Right. And talk to me just for a minute about, internal ID departments, because they wear a lot of hats. I mean, and those guys are brought in, or the gals, they're brought in, to kind of handle what's happening with the company. And a lot of times they're just kind of, emergency, responders for the most part. They don't have a lot of time to sit and think about what the future is, because they're responding and they're keeping people, set up, and they're making sure that everything's running correctly. You have a great analogy for this. So, talk to me just for a minute, how do we talk to IT departments? Because then they can get pretty, they get a little defensive because they don't want an outside company coming in designing the future, where that maybe it's perceived that should be their job. But I think you say it best. So tell our listeners what that looks like and how you can have those conversations with them and still, keep them, so they're not on guard, when we're having these conversations, right?
Yeah, I am incredibly thankful I came up with this analogy about 15 years ago, because you're right. When I'm going in to educate, I have two concerns. One is I'm going to imply that the C-suite was naive and didn't know the difference between what their IT team's talent set and capabilities are and are not. And second, implying that your organization needs us for your projects can indirectly imply that your IT team is deficient in this ability.
Right.
And that can create what you said, some anxiety, hesitance to even engage in the conversation.
Sure.
And so the analogy I came up with was, and I can say this in the exact same room with C-suite on one side of the table and IT on the other, and I say, look, what you've assembled here, first of all, it's right-sized. Otherwise, it's financially irresponsible. If you have a ton of people sitting around with nothing to do, you're not running a good operation. So they're right-sized to handle what's going on today. When you spike with a massive capital improvements project, a new headquarters, a new thing, you've now added a spike of workload that they're not equipped for. So you just have a capacity resource issue. Second is a specialty. And what you have here are brain surgeons. What we are is orthopedic surgeons. And that universally accomplishes the goal I have of relieving those two obstacles. One, the C-suite realizes, okay, yeah, medicine is so vast, you can't be an expert in all of it, nor should I lump my IT team into that same box that they're an expert in all things IT. It's too vast to be an expert in everything. So one, I've subtly educated the C-suite. Second, the IT team has been edified that they run the brains or the core that keeps that engine doing what it does, whether they're a law firm, a pharmaceutical firm, whatever they do, they keep that thing running, making money, serving customers, accomplishing its goal.
Right.
You cannot take them out of that work stream and then ask them to go repair a broken bone. It's just not their specialty. nor is that a good use of their time. You do not want your team, your brain surgeons, Googling a white paper on how to do a knee replacement surgery. Not a great outcome for the patient.
Yeah.
Certainly not good use of their time. So we just say, hey, let them keep doing the brains. We're simply going to, from a design and construction aspect, work with all of your professionals, your architects, your MEP engineers, your structural engineers, your GC. We're going to build you the bones of that physical IT infrastructure to let you do great things.
And then their IT department, the internal department, can then, kind of be free, to help guide what happens on the daily. Here's what our people typically need. Here's what we're looking at. So they can help guide that process and guide, that the architecture of, that new system, knowing how much they're going to be able to support it, right? And, what kind of response they're going to expect out of their own people because they know them, they're the ones that are in there with them on the daily. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's, that is one of the stickiest kind of situations we've been in, is because it does get a little weird, and it's not that we're trying to say, hey, you don't know what you're doing. It's you got enough going on. Mm-hmm. Please continue to do this because it's critical to the daily business, and how everything runs. But we're going to bring this other team to support you to be able to create, what's going to hit our goals for the future. And then it can, we can do that as a team.
So I would add to that, we have around our company at BRYTESIGHT, we have what we call the aha moment. And I'll always ask my project manager that's running a project, hey, have they had the aha moment? And it typically happens between weeks 2 and 4 of when we're engaged. And there's this aha moment, there's this moment of clarity and peace of mind when the IT team and the non-technical stakeholders of a project have this moment of aha. And that's where the symphony is playing perfectly, because we're fluent in 2 languages. We are fluent in IT, so we go off and have IT conversations that no exec who's non-technical or architect or PM ever wants to sit in. You'd rather stab your eye with a pencil than listen to this nomenclature. But we talk, we're fluent in geek, and we go talk everything IT for the org, and then we translate it into design requirements, pathways, power, cooling, floors, ceilings, walls, things that the human is going to interact with that you're in charge of designing. And when we start to merge those 2 things, the aha moment is probably one of my favorite parts of the job.
Oh, I love it. And I do love an aha moment too when it comes to design. So before we move on, touch real quick on the TCS that you are now, this is an enhanced service that you're now doing. So tell us about what that is and why you're excited about it and why it's working.
Yeah, it was very fortunate. It was born out of a customer request. I would love to say I had the epiphany myself, but the brain surgeon one is one enough, I guess. But normally in our consultative process, we will draw on BIM and Revit and do all the drawings to work with the design team. And then we will RFP and competitively select installers and then manage them.
Right.
In that model, the contracts of those installers are typically held by either the client or the general contractor. Mm-hmm. Well, I had a global customer of mine come about 18 months ago and say, hey, will you start holding the contracts? And there's a whole host of reasons of value they wanted to do. And so we did, but one of my reluctancies for it was I was worried general contractors might be, hey, you're stepping on our toes. And turns out I was 100% wrong.
Uh-huh.
They were
It was a good time to be wrong this time.
Oh yeah, they were overjoyed to say, whoa, you're going to take these technology scopes that are always changing, difficult to understand, and manage that alongside us and de-risk the process. And so what that has opened up is, traditionally, if a project got through CDs and hadn't involved us, it was kind of too late for us to help them. So when you talk about a forest fire, it's burning too big. I can't save the day.
Yeah.
Now with TCS, we can do that.
And TCS stands for?
Technology Contracting Services.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So now a general contractor, when they get less than 100% complete detailed drawings or specifications for technology systems, don't have to take that risk on of filling the gaps with their limited knowledge. They can simply write one contract to BRYTESIGHT. We will engineer any gaps in the design to make a full and functioning system, because that's what we do for a living on the consulting side.
Right.
And then they can write one contract to us, and we will RFP and buyout, open book, what we're already doing on the consulting side. So we're not doing anything different. We're just allowed to enter the project through a different door at a different time and still provide huge value.
And what you're finding is the contractors still taking on that risk. They're still taking on the cost, because a lot of times the cost is having to go back and tweak things, change things, or react to things because they didn't have an opportunity to plan them out, to the extent that you're talking about. So I'm glad to hear that that's been a positive response for you. And, that's probably one of your biggest targets at the moment, maybe, or more PMs and, construction, general contractors, because that is a good way to get in. Sometimes it's hard for the client, we were talking about this, it's hard for the client to pull the trigger maybe on that fee, because I think I'm already paying an architect, I'm already paying a designer, I'm already paying, the structural, the MEP. Why do I need to pay for this, technology architect now too, right? Which is what you guys are offering. But if that's, kind of put under the umbrella of the GC now, and they've already accounted for those costs anyway, that's just a win-win for everyone. And that way it's fully integrated, right? Am I making that, kind of synopsis correct?
You couldn't have said it better myself. That really is exactly what we can do there.
That's brilliant. I mean, it's
a
good model.
We always tout Amazon for creating the frictionless buying process, right? 1 or 2 clicks and we're done. If we can remove the friction of, why do I need another consultant? Remove the friction of, you're too late, you've missed the window, and just be a right time execution. For every one project that engages a consultant like BRYTESIGHT, there are probably 100 that don't.
Yeah.
So just from a market size and project opportunity, we don't want to have to holistically reinvent the system of designing construction by educating them. You need to bring a consultant in early. So for those who haven't yet, or maybe never will, we can play within the current paradigm. And that's what I'm excited most about, is removing friction, but still delivering.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's going to be a great successful, arm of the operation that you're doing. And I'm sure it'll go even farther than you think, because that is just the right time to get all those subs in. I mean, you become, this expert sub, in that case. So I think that's really great. So tell me, you've experienced a lot of these projects. Tell me kind of a tech rescue, where you've been able to come in at maybe the 11th hour, and, kind of salvage what was happening and bring your expertise to the table in order to give the client, the successful project that they were looking at that maybe might have gone off the rails and you guys not jumped in.
Yeah, we had actually...
Or had gone off the rails and you helped set it straight.
Yeah, one of the more interesting ones was actually a Fortune 500 customer they were at the broker stage actually still, and they were looking at a build to suit, consolidating 3 locations into one, or renovating the 3 locations.
Okay.
So they were at a very high level programming, master planning, budgeting. And the project manager of this large brokerage house called and said, Randy, IT may have just killed this deal. They gave a budget of like $25 million for the IT components of this move, and just kind of really disrupted everyone's objectives. And within 10 business days, we had budgeted the build-to-suit option, the renovate all 3, or consolidate into one existing space, and it was like 8.8 million, 10 million, and 12 million. And they did end up going the build-to-suit option. And so sometimes it can even just resurrect at the beginning of a concept. And it's just getting the right data. I think the IT team operated out of a place of fear. Maybe they were too busy to do a thorough budget. I mean, we talked about that already, some of their
making assumptions.
limitations. And, just coming in and giving them that clarity of that they could count on, because they need data to make these big decisions.
Right.
On the other end, it's not uncommon to be called out by someone like you or a PM that says, help, we thought the customer was going to do this design. We've had these clouded spaces with no design for a long time as placeholders. Turns out they don't have the time. They don't have the experience. Can you come in and save it? We've been called on a Thursday. CDs are due on a Monday. Those are some of the rescue nights. Those are the unsung hero moments. And I'm always proud of the team I've built they're customer service fanatics.
That's great.
They don't want to live that way on a traditional basis, but will never shy away from answering the call when we get that.
We're the same way. I mean, we actually have done more sort of, I guess you call them rescue stories than we would sometimes like to admit, but we love that. And being able to come in and help with whatever it is. There may have just been a communication breakdown, or they're just not on the same page, or they're not speaking the same language, or whatever that looks like, and then they come to us and they say, maybe our team just wasn't listening. Well, we're here for it, and we're here to listen, and we're here to bring the rest of the team, surround that client like you, and all of those consultants so that they do get, the end result that they need. But I think one of the things that we need to touch on is technology doesn't always solve everything right away either, so we kind of bring this round. What does that look like? How can a company, how can an executive team or an HR team come in and help to integrate that, so that you're not just saying, here's all this great technology and it's going to do all these things, but nobody really talks about it. There's not training on it. There's not, a cultural acceptance to it. It's like, it's not just going to solve itself overnight. What would you say in situations like that? And what are you seeing out there that
oh goodness,
kind of gets you fired up?
I will try to keep the soapbox away where I don't get on it, but you are really hitting a passion project for me. And it goes back to the integration and alignment of the organization and people. A shovel doesn't dig a hole itself.
No.
A tool is only as good as the person who uses the tool. Do not hand me a violin and expect a good outcome. It's a great tool in the hands of the right people with the right training, with the right enablement or reinforcement that these are our processes and procedures.
Sure.
Then it can. Setting it and forgetting it and expecting it to accomplish what humans can do is a mistake. I think some people think if I just buy this stuff and give it to them, everything will be great.
They'll know what to do with it.
Right.
They're savvy.
Technology is an innate. Everyone intuitively knows what to do with a chair. They sit in it. Mm-hmm. Technology is not the same. So it's an enablement tool for humans to do more great things. So there has to be processes and reinforcement. Our leadership team just read a great book. What got you here won't get you there. Mm-hmm. And one of the lines I loved most in there was, don't fall for the check the boxes fallacy, which is I told people to do this and I trained people to do this checkbox. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they're going to follow through and actually use it, adopt it, deploy it on a consistent, repeatable basis to get the outcome you want.
Right.
So there are people that have room schedulers or they have video teleconferencing in rooms and it's underutilized. Oh my goodness. When the CFO sees an expense not returning.
Absolutely.
An ROI, there's just a lot there. So it's not a set it and forget it. We need to be integrated with the whole executive team on how you roll it out, how you present it, how you train them on it, how you measure adoption, how you listen to the user's feedback of what's working and not working.
That's a very good point.
If it just, and it's not a big effort to just add those extra pieces to give it the holistic view you need to really get the ROI and impact you're looking for.
Yeah. And that's basically it at the end of the day. It has to have the ROI. And so I think it is critical, to make sure that you're implementing it and you're talking about your training. It has to be fully part of that change management strategy.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a move or just an upgrade or whatever it looks like. And of course it has to be easy to use, and things are getting a lot easier, but to your point, it has to be easy for that particular client, and so the feedback from people, this is great technology, but it's not working for me, or it's not doing what I need it to do, or I need a next level. Hearing that and being able to implement that and go back, to you guys or to, their teams and get that fixed, that's going to be where the ROI comes in, right? So I know that this all kind of plays into hybrid work too, and we shared a few thoughts before this. Is there anything you want to share about what you're seeing in technology that's supporting or making hybrid work more difficult? I mean, that is a big part of today, and I know, even more recently, there's a lot of mandate to come back to the office, and I think at some point it's going to level out. There's still going to be some autonomy. There's still going to be people that need to be hybrid. Just being back at the office is going to be a little different. So what in your mind are the most important ways that the technology you're seeing is supporting that effort and being nimble enough to handle, everyone coming back versus, trying to do this equitable, connection of people that are in and outside of the office?
Yeah, I tend to approach the return to office, work from home tug of war with optimism and hope, which I tend to like. The audience tends to immediately lean forward and go, "Oh, finally someone coming to me with a good line of thinking, not a hesitant or adverse line of thinking." And I think there's been a couple things that have happened over the last 5 years that have really helped. So I'd love to share. One is, when I ask people what % of us were using video teleconferencing and hybrid tech solutions before COVID, they kind of think and look to the sky, and it was less than 5%. Think back, most of us were still on an audio call only. We had key customers in certain West Coast and other pockets that were really adopting it. But by and large, we were not. That was not a standard workplace behavior.
And we were doing Zooms if we had a drawing to show or something, but it was still, please come to our studio. Please, it was a lot more in person. So we feel that too.
Yeah, the video conferencing technology was more of an outlier than the standard.
Right.
Well, then COVID happened, and probably one of the benefits that came out of COVID was desperation breeds innovation. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of these tech companies that were building hybrid technologies were playing that R&D investment return game of, hey, we don't have adoption yet, let's put in a little bit of R&D money and we'll see where it goes. Well, COVID just slammed the accelerator to the floor.
For so many things.
That poured a ton of money into create products that make humans successful remote.
Right.
And now we come back out of COVID and 95% of us use on a daily basis video teleconferencing and other remote technologies. So COVID really did help in that one way in advancing investment and development of great tools for hybrid work, which has been one of the few blessings out of a tough time for all of us. Yeah. Now what it's done is the average user has expectations now. I have these tools, they do these things for me, and I have this type of experience. It's actually easier to manufacture that in a single setting at your home. Frame one person, one headshot, get your acoustics right, your lighting right, than it is in these collaborative spaces that not only have to serve 15, 20, 30 people in a space, but also cater to the people in the space and the remote audience.
Right.
That's where the technology design challenge still sits. But the hope is great. The investment in the tools has gotten a lot better. We can just about do anything that a business owner wants from a technology experience with those in the room and those far away, which is why one of the more leading trends is, what's the only way today that the user watches remotely but feels like they're right there? Cinema, broadcast quality technologies. That's why we're seeing most of our big headquarters clients build a broadcast studio or capability in their indoor outdoor town hall areas, so that the 100 or 200 who convene in person have the exact same experience for the remote users all across the globe. So the lighting, the production, it has to have, Super Bowl quality, show quality technology.
Yeah.
So that investment is going up, but you ask any executive when they see that price tag, one of their biggest fears with any org, the larger it is how do I carry out leadership's passion, commitment, vision, and just overall ethos of our company to far reaches of our most remote employee? Right. They will invest in that almost every time. So that's been a great trend.
It's a big difference. And we work with a lot of clients who, were doing that even, years ago. And thankfully, like you said, there are some benefits that came out of, what we experienced. And now that technology is better. We have lots of clients that do the town halls all the time. And yes, that is becoming a major production, but it makes such a big difference. Like you said, in the culture, across, whatever the distance is that they need to reach, because that experience just feels more and more and more, integrated for both sides, right? Well, this has been great. I'm hoping you have a couple things for me while we wrap up. And one of them is, give me just a quick story, something memorable out of some of the experiences you've had, something that's either transformative, maybe teaches us something, or it's just funny and you just have to share it because we're all in this together, you know, and we have to maintain a sense of humor.
Yeah. Well, I do love a good analogy, and some people ask me, what do I do? And I tell them what BRYTESIGHT does. And then they say, well, what do you do? Like, what do you do every day? And the best analogy that I have, and it's such a fun role, is I feel like I walk around with the most delicious donut you could have ever imagined. And I get in front of a PM, an architect, or a customer, and I say, if you try this, it will be transformative. It will literally change your life for the better. They listen, they're skeptical, they evaluate it, they do all the adult things you should before they take the bite.
Sure.
All the due diligence and all the analytics. And I just wish I could slow-mo the video when they finally sample. Because once they sample it, it does change their life. The eyes are open, the birds sing a little brighter, you know, everything is just better. And that's what we do for a living. We bring them something they haven't had before, usually. If they've used a similar service but haven't gotten the same experience, it's been more engineering and tech, less people focused and friendly.
Yeah.
It's just, I love to revolutionize and give them that aha moment. And luckily we built a team of passionate people who love to do the same. And so it's just great to convert. I always like to take the skeptic to a believer to a champion. And I love watching our partners and clients become that, watch them through that journey.
That's a really great perspective I have. I agree. And it's, you know, more and more, the more AI and everything else that comes, you know, kind of bearing down on us very quickly, the human connection, you know, which is why I stubbornly and insisting on doing these in person, because there is a difference. And that's why people come back to the office. That's why, you know, we want to interact with, you know, our coworkers, and because it's that human piece of it. It's the social capital. It's, you know, it's being engaged one-on-one, you know. And so I really appreciate that. So one thing, as we sign off here, what's one thing that you would tell, you know, company executive team, just one piece of advice, you know, if maybe they don't even know where to start.
Yep.
You know, what is one, you know, kind of a piece of advice you would leave with our guests, with our audience today?
Oh, of course. Be intentional and strategic with your IT. Just include it as one of your main pillars, as you would HR, operations. It needs to be a foundational pillar. We've already discussed how much it enables the human, the most expensive part of your operation, the most critical to its success. They're using it so much, both in office and remote, everywhere they go, and in between. Make it intentional and strategic, and your outcomes are going to get better. And you can turn to someone like us or ask your owners, reps, your developers, your project managers, your designers, and hopefully they've heard of us or someone like us that can come to the table and fill that role so you get those best outcomes you're searching for.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And it's, you know, like you said, and, you know, we've, you know, worked with you. We love working with your team. Like you said, if you can't do that, or you just need to reach out to someone else, at least make sure you're talking about it early on. At least get in there, you know, see what the needs are, and, you know, figure out, you know, some happy medium between your RTO and, you know, your return on investment, and, you know, all of the things, all the factors and goals that you have on a project, and understanding, I think it's the second biggest expenditure, right, past your people. Right, the technology is maybe even surpassing that at some point, but that is a huge investment, and make sure that it makes sense before you just, you know, kind of blindly throw a bunch of money at it, or no money at all, and not understanding, you know, how that can negatively affect, you know, the project or your success down the road. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about employee recruitment, employee retention, employees want to work where they can be productive and collaborate, feel successful, and make an impact.
Right.
Is your technology helping that cause, or is it a headwind? If you're not being intentional and strategic and aren't even asking that question, the answer may not be what you want it to be at this moment. So it's one call away. Lean on your trusted advisors, and you know, maximize, you know, what you're trying to do at your business to be the best version of you can.
I love that. And minimize the headwinds, because we don't need any more headwinds right now. I think everybody is struggling enough with all of, the fallout from pandemic and, just the kind of big question mark, of the future of work. So I hope that I love this conversation, and we hope to continue to bring these conversations to light. I want to be, more of this bridge between all the ideas and the challenges that are out there, and try to make it a little bit more bite size and easier to understand. So I'm glad that you brought some clarity to the technology piece, because it's huge and we have to talk about it, and it's not going to go away. And it's such a pivotal piece of, what we do on the daily, that it definitely deserves, that attention. So thanks so much. And, for all your conversation, and for being a great support out there, in this cause, and helping companies, realize that they actually can make a successful run of designing their technology for their new spaces.
Well, you've assembled quite an iconic group of industry thought leaders in other disciplines already, so it was my honor to be here today, to be amongst them and share some thoughts.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Of course.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. I hope you liked this chat with Randy Shaw. So many great nuggets he shared, and look forward to hearing from you. Don't forget to subscribe, share with a friend, and let us know how you're creating a place to work, live, and thrive.